Welcome to St. Petersburg, Russia.
What's up? We're going to Russia right now. Getting off the boat. Gotta go through a customs type thing. It's a serious ordeal, and hopefully I'll get some good pictures and video in Russia.
We left the cruise ship and then headed by tour bus into St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is a city that was founded by Tsar Peter the Great in 1703. And it continued to serve as the capital of the Russian Empire until 1918, when it was replaced by Moscow. St. Petersburg has a population of over 5 million people, and it is the most northern city in the world with a population of over 1 million. Our first stop took us to St. Isaac's Cathedral. It is one of the largest cathedrals in the world. Construction began in 1818, and 40 years later it was completed in 1858. It remained a cathedral until 1931, when it was taken over by the Soviet government and turned into a museum. St. Isaac's Cathedral was an impressive structure. One of the things you notice most is the columns. It has 112 granite columns that surround this building, with 48 of those being on the ground floor. But at the heart of St. Petersburg is the Neva River. St. Petersburg is situated on the Neva River at the head of the Gulf of Finland on the Baltic Sea, and the river plays an important role in this city. In addition to the river, there is a vast network of canals that spread through the city, and over the rivers and the canals there are over 800 bridges located in St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is often called the Venice of the North due to their canal system. And this is the Peter and Paul Fortress. It was the original citadel. Much of St. Petersburg's architecture is Baroque and neoclassical. It is strongly European inspired, but also has a huge Soviet influence. Behind the statue you can see the Russian Museum in the background. 2 days after our visit to St. Petersburg, the World Cup games were going to start there, and you could see evidence of it around the city. There are all kinds of beautiful statues and monuments down by the river. And there are also many buildings. This is the old stock exchange building. We decided to stop and take some pictures along the Neva River with the Hermitage in the background. The Hermitage is one of the largest museums in the entire world, and it was the perfect backdrop for our photos. We went by the Artillery Museum and then headed to Nevsky Prospect. This is the main road in all of St. Petersburg, and it was a very busy place. We stopped in a Russian store and bought some World Cup t-shirts, and then went along and saw some of the street vendors. Then we made our way to the Church of the Saviour on Spilled Blood. It was built on the site of the assassination of Alexander II, and it is a must-see stop on your tour of St. Petersburg. We continued our tour by foot and then stopped to take some pictures with the World Cup mascot. We went by Isaac Cathedral and the General Staff Building. I was fascinated by the electric bus transportation system and the old cars that were all around the city. This is a large square that was near the Hermitage Museum. And here's just some more pictures of the architecture of this amazing city. This is the Lacta Center, which is the tallest building in Europe. And this is Peterhof Stadium, the site of the World Cup games in St. Petersburg. These are new condominiums that are being built for the city's growing population, and this is just a typical residential area in St. Petersburg. The next morning, we headed to the Peterhof Estate, and we passed one of St. Petersburg's big shipyards. Once our bus arrived, we were given a headset and earpiece so we could hear our guide as we toured the palace and gardens of the Peterhof Estate. The estate was a beautiful place, and we were there on a perfect day. Peter the Great built this property as a direct response to the Palace of Versailles built by Louis XIV of France. This is the famous Samson statue and fountain. The estate sits on 1,500 acres of formal gardens, and it is located 18 miles from St. Petersburg, and it has over 170 fountains that are fed by underground springs. And throughout the early 18th century, Peter the Great built and expanded the Peterhof Palace complex as a part of his goal to modernize and westernize Russia. It is amazing the amount of gold structures that you see there. We continued to explore the lower gardens, but there was one spot where you could turn back and look at the Grand Palace. It was a beautiful view, and we had to stop and take some pictures there. As we made our way to the back of the property, there were many more fountains and statues to see along the way. There were also more beautiful gardens and more beautiful gold statues. But some statues were not quite as lovely as others. We continued our journey to the back of the Peterhof complex, where this complex meets the Gulf of Finland, which is part of the Baltic Sea. This area has a pier where you can buy tickets for your journey back into St. Petersburg, and our tour guide had us tickets to ride a hydrofoil on the way back. It was cool seeing all the flags as we headed to our hydrofoil. And here is the picture of the hydrofoil that we rode on. Again, a hydrofoil is a type of a boat that uses a foil that operates under the water. And then as the boat picks up speed, this foil actually lifts the hull up out of the water so that you can go at even greater speeds. On our trip back through the Gulf of Finland, we were able to see the Lactus Center, which again is the tallest building in all of Europe at over 1,500 feet tall. We then passed some shipyards and some of the industrial areas of St. Petersburg. We continued our way down the Neva River, and again we're able to see some of the beautiful architecture along the river. We then passed the famous Peter and Paul Fortress and went right by the Hermitage Museum again. And this is where our hydrofoil docked. After we disembarked, we walked up the stairs, and then we were standing right in front of the world-famous Hermitage Museum. The Hermitage was founded in 1764 by Catherine the Great as a court museum, and it was part of the Winter Palace. We then got back on our tour bus and continued our journey exploring around the city. I wasn't sure really what to expect when we started our adventure through St. Petersburg, as we were told this was not the safest place for Americans to visit. However, when we were in Russia, we felt very safe and the people were very friendly. Although we were on a tour, oftentimes our tour guide would leave us alone and let us explore parts of the city on our own. And it was a pleasure to see the sights and to mingle with some of the locals. There are definitely areas where you feel like you've been transported back to the area of the Soviet Union. But there are other areas of the city that are very modern and vibrant. St. Petersburg is definitely a mix of the old and the new, and is a beautiful city to explore, and I am so glad that I got the opportunity to visit. As we made our way back to our ship, again we passed Peterhof Stadium, the site of the World Cup, and the Lacta Tower and Center. St. Petersburg, I'm glad I got the opportunity to visit you. It was a pleasure. Until next time.